Hi everyone. I'm going to do the slideshow here and give you some instructions. Okay, so this is the chapter on active audiences and users. This is where we shift in the model to the next section on users, away from content. So these are some things you might want to think about before we really get into it. Audience, right? So what is an active audience? New media. And then when we talk about an active audience, what does this do with agency and structure? Clearly, we're on the agency side now, right? Because audiences are active, that means you're doing things. And then this other issue. So, when they say the problems of media affects research, a lot of research, especially in the 70s, focused on how media affected other people. So, does watching violent television make you violent, or does it make you resistant to violence because you're so repulsed by it? Does watching a lot of television commercials for sugary cereal make kids less healthy because they pressure their parents to buy these things that they see advertised? Does using funny cartoon characters in television advertising for children impact what they want their parents to buy? All of these different effects: violence, sexual content, video games. Do video games have an effect on people? So because there were so many, and this research is still going on, let me say, but because it was so predominant for so long, there was kind of a backlash where people said, hey, human beings have brains. They make choices about what to watch. They have some agency. Let's focus instead on what people do with the media and why they use the media, instead of focusing so much on what media does to us. So the main theory that goes along with active audience is uses and gratifications theory. But this is the kind of the whole premises, right? That we are competent, we use media to create our own stories. We can also create media. And so there's kind of a line between being a producer and a consumer that gets blurred a little bit. These are the different ways that audiences may be active, right? Interpretation. And maybe a person has the person who produces the media has a certain meaning in mind that they want us to get, but sometimes we don't take their meaning. We negotiate our own meaning for that. And that might depend on our social context. It might depend on other things. So again, human agency is how we make meaning from media texts. And then the word polysemy refers to the fact that there are multiple meanings. So one person might think that someone is truly evil in the story. And then another person might think that, no, he just suffered a lot because of what he's been through, but he's not really evil, right? So I hope you understand what I mean by different. There's a very famous case. There's an entire book about the Cosby Show. And they did focus groups with viewers of the Cosby Show, people who were regular or semi-regular viewers. And what they found was a complexity to the meaning that people took away from it. One meaning was a better picture of Black families, right? Black families are, especially after the 70s and shows like Sanford and Son and the Jeffersons and Good Times, where people were always struggling and suffering. This was a show where finally it was like, yes, Black people are doctors. Black people are lawyers. Black people have nice homes and nice children. And, it's not just laughing about the problems you have, right? So it really normalized, right, the way that black families looked for regular, all Americans of any race and color, right? Because it was such a popular show. Everyone watched the Cosby Show when it was on. I watched the Cosby Show when I was growing up. I loved it. But the other thing they found out when they did these focus groups was that there were a certain number of people who said, well, this image of a black family, if this is the way black families are, then what about the ones who are struggling? I guess they're just not working hard enough to be like this. I guess they just don't value education. So it kind of also placed an unrealistic expectation on, an entire group of people that have suffered under the structural inequalities built into American institutions, education, banks, getting a mortgage, being able to buy homes in certain neighborhoods, the racism that was inherent in the way American society was structured. And so people thought, well, if they can do it, most other blacks should be able to do it, and why aren't they doing it? Right? So it's just that a show can produce different meanings for different people. So at the same time as we're talking about agency, we still need to remember that we are constrained by the way we've been trained and the way we've learned, right? So we are limited still by, the fact that we live in a capitalistic culture, a democracy, um, versus someone who lives in another type of culture. So the other big theory, besides uses and gratifications, is encoding decoding theory. And this is the one I really like, which basically it was Stuart Hall who came up to this, a very famous British Caribbean scholar, dominant, oppositional, and negotiated reading. So let's say the producers of The Cosby Show had a certain meaning in mind. Maybe they wanted us to see that, as I said, to normalize black people's lives and their chances for success. But, other people may have not taken it that way, and others may have kind of negotiated the meaning between those. So this is a famous study that was done in England. This was the first one to really study Stuart Hall's model. And it was Nationwide was a television news program, so think like 2020 or Dateline. And he specifically studied how social class impacted the way people interpreted it. Some other very famous ones, there was this was actually, I think, done in North Carolina, Gender, Class, and Television. So working class women were critical of the images they saw, but middle class women were more receptive to the depictions of women. I don't know all the details of that one. This was, again, the news coverage of the riots in LA. So in terms of news and race, I know you were not alive probably during those, but there were a lot of protests, black protesters, Korean shop owners whose shops were destroyed. And so there was a lot of, who's causing the conflict, who is the victim of the conflict, and then different groups interpreting the news in different ways. I'm going to go into this one real quick, the international readings of American TV. This is Dallas. I don't know if you've ever even heard of this, but it was a show in the 1980s, and it was a family drama show. So there was lots of, it's kind of like a nighttime soap opera, right? So it was a family, but they were wealthy, but, lots of betrayal and cheating and money issues and swindling people. And it was a Texas family, and it was they earned their money from oil. Oops, wait, let me go back to that. So it was really popular around the world, but the way it was interpreted was different based on where the viewers were from. So the Russians were kind of viewed it as like almost like a trying to figure everything out. The Arabs were very disapproving of the moral character of these people, that they would betray and cheat on each other and be mean to family members. And then the Japanese were just completely confused by it. So this is another thing, right? I don't know how many of you do this, but second screen, when you are watching, Real Housewives or some other show, and at the same time you're using your computer or you're on Twitter commenting about the show. So that's kind of a new, in the past couple of years since we've had social media. And often those things actually sometimes determine the way the show goes after that. Which means that you're also kind of media making in a way too, because you may be affecting, if a character ends up leaving the show or something like that. And then online too, right? Black Twitter is a way that audiences use to challenge bias in mainstream media stories. So it was a way to redefine issues, to enforce counter narratives and testimonials, so let other people's voices be heard, and organize and build community. I'm going to skip this a little bit, and then that's, why create, right? Self-expression, build community sharing, social communities. So fan communities, I don't know if any of you participate in fan communities, Harry Potter or Star Wars or other types of fans. And that is that. So I hope that gave you a good introduction to the to what's going on in this chapter. I'm going to post this to YouTube